And joining me right now, Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under Obama and Senior National Security Advisor in the U.S. Senate, and Ravi Agrawal, the Editor-in-Chief at Foreign Policy. Guys, thanks for coming back. Hope you got some coffee in the interim because it's early. Okay, Joel, put into perspective this interview with Joe Biden and the Russian president. Is there a possibility of a stable, trustworthy, really successful working relationship with Vladimir Putin? I mean, did the United States and Russia have same common goals?
Well, from a strategic perspective, there are a lot of opportunities for stability. And Joe Biden is no stranger to this debate. He was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for a number of years, a big leader on nuclear nonproliferation efforts, for example. The first move that he made towards Russia when he came into office was to renew the New START agreement, an arms control agreement that we've had with Russia for a number of years. So there are opportunities, and I think that's what the White House wants. Clearly, they want predictability and stability. That isn't always what we get with Vladimir Putin, though. Right. He pulls a lot of strings, and Ukraine is going to come up. Other critical issues in the Middle East may come up as well. So there are opportunities on that. There are opportunities potentially on climate change in the Arctic for bigger strategic issues. But the tensions underneath the surface aren't going to go away just because there are areas where we have to engage Russia.
So I'm curious, Ravi, if everybody can get on the same page with regard to China. You have France, Germany, the UK. They're all trying to develop business deals, if you will, trade and the like with China. So where does that put the United States and its stance? Does it sync up with those three countries specifically?
I think that's what it's trying to do. I mean, the U.S., this really is, in a sense, one of the points of the G7. If you think about it, it is an alliance of rich Western democracies. And when you use those three words, rich and Western and democracy, you are essentially what China is not. Right? And China still isn't a rich country in terms of per capita income. Otherwise, it would have been part of the grouping. So there's that on the one hand. And then on the other hand, you have sort of more tangibly what these countries stand for and what they want to do and how they want to align themselves in the world. And when it comes to all of that, it only makes sense. And this is why we're seeing the news today about the infrastructure that the U.S. wants to try and put together with these countries as a sort of bulwark against China's Belt and Road Initiative. There's also competition. We haven't talked about vaccines, but of course, the G7 is trying to make sure that about 1 billion vaccines reach other parts of the world. Most of the world is still unvaccinated. Its main competitor there is China. China, of course, has already exported 250 million vaccines. So another arena of competition for all of these countries.
Yeah. Ravi, you and I mentioned Helsinki and the relationship between Putin and Trump. Let's also look back to the 2019 G7 summit and the difference in tenor that we can just see from the video of the way these leaders are interacting, the still footage that we have. Compare and contrast how you think the perception is of Trump versus Biden.
Oh, gosh. Could not be more different.
Yep. So contrast, I guess, is the word.
Yeah, there's very little to compare. They are both presidents.
Yeah.
That's where the comparison begins and ends. I mean, Trump was antagonistic. He didn't see allies with a sense of trust. He saw global trade as a zero-sum game. He saw alliances as things that could potentially hurt America. He wanted to go it alone. Biden is the opposite. He's an old-school allies guy. He's an Atlantic man. He sees these allies with trust. He wants to build a bulwark of democracies. He allies himself with other democratic leaders. Trump, of course, allied himself with autocrats, more friendly with Putin than he was with Merkel, for example. So the difference couldn't be more stark. And I think this week, that ultimately is the headline. That's what's on display. America, in that sense, is back. If you're a European leader, you look at Biden, you look at the rhetoric, you look at the things that the world is seeing and talking about, and at least that notion of allyship is back.
But I think there is some concern about for how long, given what did happen for 4 years, wondering if that could happen again. Let me look at some stats here and pose them to you, Joel, from a Pew Research poll. 12 major nations taken in this poll found that 75% have confidence in Biden to do the right thing on the world stage. Compare that to just 17% for Donald Trump. What is Joe Biden doing right now. How does he build on that? And does part of it just even stem from the fact that he's not Donald Trump?
Well, Alex, that poll is stunning. That turnaround is unprecedented, and it's a demonstration not just because he's not Donald Trump, but because Joe Biden is actually talking about the things that people around the world care about. He's talking about ending the coronavirus. He's talking about climate change. He's talking about a global minimum tax, for example, that is going to help facilitate more investment in countries, in their home infrastructure. And so he's talking about issues that matter to people, and I think that's why the reception is so strong. And going to Ravi's point, Donald Trump was orchestrating autocrats for 4 years. He was not orchestrating democracies. That is what's polar opposite right now. And people around the world appreciate that. That's why he's popular in these polls, and that's where he has the wind at his sails. It's a very different message. It's not just a different man.
Yeah, very much to your point. I mean, we think about Donald Trump, his relationship with Vladimir Putin, also the relationship that he had with Kim Jong-un.
Right.
So exactly to your point. Let me ask you, Ravi, about Queen Elizabeth and why you think she decided to travel to the G7. She certainly brought, I guess we called it the charm offensive, and seemed to be thoroughly enjoying herself, which I think we all were happy to see, given her sorrows of late.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, it's been a difficult year for her in terms of her personal loss, but also for the royal family. A lot of publicity that the royal family would rather it didn't get this year. And in that sense, this really is an ideal opportunity for her to sort of be trotted out to sort of meet the leaders that many of whom she's met before, and she has a convivial rapport with them, and it's non-controversial. This is what the Queen does best. Great way for her to be back in the limelight, and really just lovely images all around.
Ravi Agrawal and then Joel Rubin, you guys, it's been so good to have you join me this morning. Thank you so much for your time.